Today we're talking with Dr. Carrie Jackson in San Diego and has a private practice there. You're also teaching at the graduate students, correct?
Yep, at the University of San Diego.
How did you get so interested in ADHD? You specialize in that, right?
Yes, I do. First, thank you for having me on here. I love what you're doing, focusing on supporting girls getting diagnosed earlier with ADHD. A big part of the reason why that I got interested actually in supporting individuals with ADHD is because I was undiagnosed for a very long time, actually. I struggled with different symptoms of ADHD throughout my life, but it really wasn't until after graduate school that I was diagnosed. During graduate school, I started working with parents of kids who have challenges with their emotions as well as ADHD. And so now, really, like my passion, it's a combination of all of the experiences I had as a child, but then all of the amazing work that I've been able to do with parents to see how much of an impact the parents can make on raising their kids with ADHD to really support them.
That probably explains why your writing is so compassionate. I was reading some of your social media today about how to understand when your child is frustrated and seems angry. It's more because they're having executive function problems, which I certainly found with my son and with myself.
As somebody who experiences ADHD, and I'm sure you feel this way too, the way you think about the challenges associated with it really impact how you approach it. Try and take that approach with all of the information that I share on social media as well.
That's terrific. Are you seeing an equal number of girls and boys in your private practice?
I am certainly seeing many more girls now than I did previously, which is great because parents are getting much more aware of some of the signs and symptoms in girls. I am seeing an increase in inattentive symptoms, though, regardless of gender. A lot of parents, they're starting to pick up on some of these inattentive signs and they're like, oh, now I understand ADHD. It doesn't just mean that they have to have that hyperactivity, which is a big thing that I'm hearing nowadays.
That's great. In your practice, is it an equal number of girls and boys?
I would say it's actually more girls than boys, surprisingly, which is not the norm. It's definitely not the norm. A lot of kids that are diagnosed, like as you guys were saying, most boys are diagnosed earlier than girls. It's nice that I am seeing a lot more girls that are diagnosed earlier as well, too, so that we can support them earlier as well.
Terrific. So, what age are they being diagnosed?
I see all ranges in my practice for girls. I'm definitely starting to see them younger, like the 6-year-old range, but even up through like the teenage years, I will do diagnoses of young adults too. But the majority I see their kids through the teenage years. I'll diagnose anywhere from 6 years old all the way up until 17, 18, especially during the puberty age range. I'm seeing a lot of girls who are having the struggles around teenage times because there's more emotion regulation difficulties, the challenges of teens too, the emotions that come with it.
For sure. How are they being brought to you? Is it mostly their parents who are picking up these signs, or is it teachers?
It's a combination, but the majority, it's their parents, which is super cool. A lot of parents have like greater awareness now of these challenges, but the teachers, as well as therapists, they're also noticing these challenges more. Teachers and therapists can be a great person to be able to see, okay, I think this may be something like ADHD. I really want to refer for a fuller evaluation to see, but it's primarily the parents who are bringing them in.
Are there cases where the girls figure it out by themselves?
It's interesting. So since I work primarily with kids, the girls, they're not necessarily always the ones who will say, I think that this is what's going on. But I have had several teenage girls who will say, I am pretty sure I have ADHD. They are the ones who are advocating for themselves as well, too, which is huge. I love when girls and when anyone honestly is able to advocate for themselves and to really look further into, is this ADHD that's going on? Because I need some more support.
Are you seeing many girls who also have autism?
Yes, I work a lot with girls who are neurodivergent as a whole, and there is such an overlap I'm noticing, especially with girls with ADHD who are also diagnosed with autism, because again, the presentation of autism and girls can be very different in a lot of ways. Autism and ADHD, they're like two forces that go against each other. You know what I mean? With autism, a lot of the times there's liking things to be the same, really enjoying routines. But then with ADHD, I really dislike having a routine. Oftentimes it's like fighting against each other. A lot of the times when I am working with individuals who have been diagnosed with ADHD and autism, it's very challenging for them to figure out, how do I work with these different traits in myself?
How do you say that autism presents differently in girls?
The girls who are autistic that I work with, they are highly imaginative. There's a lot of storytelling that goes on in their mind. They create their own worlds in their minds. That I would say is something much more unique to the girls that I work with. As far as symptoms, you may have heard about like special interests or restricted interests. When someone who's autistic, they have a very specific interest that maybe other people they may not be as interested in. It might be something slightly out of what's socially considered acceptable as an interest, or it might just be very intense. For some of the girls, one of their special interests has been creating these stories of characters in their mind. It's almost like a way that they are engaging socially with other people, but it's with these characters in their mind. It's not people that are out in the real world. That is something that I have personally noticed is very different. That is something that's very interesting, that imaginative and creativity.
Do you think that girls with autism are caught more than girls with ADHD? Like it's the more apparent diagnosis?
I actually don't think so. There's a lot of growing information about what does autism look like in girls, right? There may be some challenges with boys who are autistic at a younger age. They do tend to be diagnosed more so with behavioral concerns, or parents may notice some more of these behavioral concerns like tantrums and but those are not as noticed for girls when they are younger. Girls may not demonstrate as many of those emotion regulation concerns when they are younger. I don't think that it's necessarily easier or more difficult to diagnose autism or ADHD. We're now learning it looks differently for a lot of different people. The diagnostic criteria for a lot of these disorders in general is very biased towards different ages and different genders as well too.
Yeah, I think with the thing you mentioned, there's a little overlap. Maybe this interest is also the hyperfocus of ADHD.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Hyperfocus and ADHD versus like restricted interest, it can be very challenging as a parent to figure out which is it. That's something definitely that a professional they can help you understand more of. But with both ADHD and autism, kids and adults tend to have very specific, intense interests. Yeah.
I know you have a lot of great parenting suggestions. How much are you talking to the parents when you're treating the girls?
So much. Like, I would say that's one of the biggest things that I do. Kids with ADHD, you can tell them what to do a million times. You could talk to them about what to do, but unless the environment is different, it's not going to help them be more supported and do the things that they need to do or want to do and be successful. Parents are one of the biggest pieces of a child's environment. The way that a parent interacts with their child, I will have sessions that I am just working totally with the parents, or I will have family sessions. That's a surprise for a lot of families because if you're bringing your kid in for therapy, you may be expecting that I'm just going to be working with just your child, but that's often not the case.
Yeah, some of the most helpful interventions we had were that kind of family therapy. We realized that our son was the identified patient. He was taking all the brunt of everybody else's shtick. He had his problems, but everybody else did too. It is super stressful, and parents need some help with managing their own stress.
Your child, they need a different like way of parenting them, interacting with them. All those things can be taught in therapy. It does take off a lot of the pressure on your child because sometimes when kids come into therapy, it can feel like, what is wrong with me? With ADHD, there's nothing that is wrong with you. It's just that your brain works differently. It's figuring out how to work with your ADHD and how your parents can work with your ADHD too.
What are the things that you commonly find yourself saying to the parents?
Focus on praising and noticing the positive is one of the biggest things I'm always focusing on. It's hard to sometimes notice the positive changes your child is making when you're feeling so stressed out, or maybe there are many challenges going on throughout the day. We know that when you notice, acknowledge the positive that you're seeing in your child, even the small steps along the way, that's going to boost their self esteem, make them feel more confident. It's also going to motivate them to keep trying, to keep pushing through and persevering, which can be hard for ADHD as well. Notice the positives in your child if you want them to feel more confident in themselves.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing I learned, certainly from my experience with my own child. Find out what they're good at and push them in that direction, what they're really interested in, and where they might get applause outside of their home.
Outside of schoolwork, they find their areas that are huge strengths for them and that they want to excel in, activities that they enjoy and they want to grow in.
It's a different kind of brain, but it's also a much riskier kind of brain. How much you talk to parents about in the future for children, the possible drug abuse, possible promiscuity. How much are you trying to work with them about that?
It's definitely a concern with ADHD. I bring it up when I'm working with parents of tweens and teenagers in the form of let's talk about some of the risks of ADHD. With ADHD, kids, they're at a constant level of under arousal. So it feels like they're in the most boring class that they've ever been in every single day. They want to do things to bring their optimal level of arousal up. They want to feel like they're in an exciting classroom. Some of the things they may do to get to that level may not be healthy things like alcohol, drugs, risky sexual activity, driving fast, driving riskier, breaking rules. So we really need to be aware of this and talk about ways to reduce the risk. Some of the ways around reducing the risk, are there any treatment options that we want to consider? Medication has been shown to actually reduce substance use disorder risk when it is started in childhood. A lot of parents, they're worried about, does medication affect my child and make it more likely they will abuse? It's actually the opposite. It reduces the risk of substance use concerns, but also thinking about how can we set up some monitoring, some safeguards for kids before they get into the tween and teen years so they have these safe boundaries that we can support them around.
What would that look like with any teenager, right? You have to have that monitoring and
Yes.
how would that
I
be enhanced? Yeah.
Yeah, so for one of the great things about technology is there's tons of great applications now to monitor these things. So I love the Life 360 app. I'm not sure if you've heard of that one, but it is great. So basically it's an app where you can essentially track location of your teenager, but also it tracks like their driving safety
Oh,
as well
wow.
too. That one it's definitely, and that's why like introducing it earlier rather than later is great. It's just something we have for safety that everybody in the family has for safety. So we know where you are. And then that way it's like when they know they're being monitored and a way to keep them safe, they're less likely to go outside of the bounds and something that is unsafe. So that's one example of creating that expectation from the beginning, utilizing an app so that you can actually track it. But there are other like monitoring apps that I would say also for like social media or for phone usage in general, which are again risk-taking pieces as well. And so if you set up some expectations and boundaries earlier, it's going to be much easier to enforce in the tween teen years.
For sure. Carrie, I'm really interested in how you got diagnosed. What were the things that led to your diagnosis, the problems that,
Yeah, as a child, the signs were clearly there. My family, they did not realize. My mom even says, I didn't realize that you could have ADHD and you could not be hyper. My mom was like, you were never hyper as a child. But there's certain phrases I remember my mom always saying to me as a child. I'm from this. My mom would sometimes jokingly say, okay, Beth, the lights are on, but nobody's home, which means I'm not paying attention at all. I remember clearly my family members telling me to light, which means to sit down because I would constantly be running around. I remember those things. My emotions were all over the place as a child. In graduate school, when schoolwork actually started to get more challenging because I never studied for a test in my life until college. I studied a little bit, but graduate school, I actually studied. With studying, it became more challenging, but I could not sit through things. I could never sit through a 3 hour class, even in middle school, high school. I would
that's
leave the movie theater.
three
Yeah,
hours. Yeah.
it was horrible.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this has been going on for a while. Yes, I am doing fine in school, but at the same time, I feel like there's an underlying reason for this, and it's been going on for a while. I wanted to look into it more. I set up an appointment with a psychiatrist. They diagnosed me with ADHD. Since then, it's just been, okay, this is a greater understanding that I now have of my life. So I do take medication myself. It's off and on at the times that I do take it. There are times where I do find that it's beneficial for me to take medication. Other times sleep for me is huge. If I am not getting good sleep, I feel way more distracted and I struggle much more. So, getting my good hours of sleep is really important. I really need exercise. If I don't exercise in the morning, it's like I have all this energy that I just need to get out. My boyfriend the other day, I didn't work out in the morning and he was like, you're literally a tiger or lying in a cage walking around, like doing things. So, exercise and eating healthy and sleeping, those things really do help me. The organizational piece is always ongoing. I'm always trying to do that, but that's hit or miss sometimes.
One thing I really want to ask you is if you believe that teacher awareness is up. We talked about how different ways kids get brought to you, but do you
Mhm.
think that teachers are learning better how to manage kids with ADHD?
I
That,
would say it's mixed and certainly not to any fault of the teachers. Teachers have told me that they do not get training in ADHD throughout their education or even their continuing education. It's been all day in school, and we really should be helping teachers with better strategies for how to manage them. If teachers can better manage the kids with ADHD, everybody is going to benefit. Teachers themselves are certainly doing what they can to get knowledge, but their education isn't helping them along the way. It's very tough for teachers to find the time or to find the training or the funds for the training.
With larger classroom sizes, it seems like the boys get caught and get over disciplined and the girls get lost. That's been happening for years, unfortunately.
Yep,
But I
I
wonder if
agree.
there are things that teachers can do for girls in particular.
It's just like knowing that girls may be more on the daydreaming side. They may appear shy, withdrawn, daydreaming during class. Looking out for those signs is just as important as looking out for the kids who are getting out of their seat or the kids who can't not raise their hand or who can't like blurt out answers or interact. Those kids who are inattentive, they may appear to be just fine during class. They're not asking a ton of questions. They may be struggling because they're daydreaming, so they may miss a lot of things, but it can be very tough to notice those. As long as teachers are building their awareness around that, I think it's going to be very helpful.
They might even be getting good grades, and
Hmm.
a teacher might reasonably think, okay, that's not a problem. But
Yeah.
the girl could be getting increasingly anxious or losing friends. Have you found teachers who notice things but are reluctant to mention it to parents?
Yeah, so I will say that teachers, the rules, and I don't know because I'm not a teacher myself, but I know that there are certain rules on what they can and cannot say. So I believe that teachers are
Oh,
not
really?
able to, yeah,
Uh,
I believe teachers they aren't able to say, I think your child may have ADHD, right? But they can bring up symptoms or concerns. Yeah, your child, they've had a lot of challenges with these types of behaviors. Like they're missing a lot of questions, like on their worksheets, they're skipping over them, or maybe they'll do only part of it, or I have to call them a lot to get their attention. But yeah, I've heard from teachers that they cannot say, I think your child may have ADHD because that's moving into medical diagnosis. Yep.
that's funny because a teacher definitely said it to me.
Yep. And I've
Specifically,
experienced the
but that
same
was
thing.
some
Yep.
years ago. I guess we're getting more sensitive about it.
Yes. I think.
Do you find a lot of false positives, like parents are over worried about kids and bring them in and are sure they have?
No, honestly, no. I actually would say that many parents they're spot on when it seems like it may be ADHD. That oftentimes it is. I will say there have been certainly some kids I've worked with where maybe it wasn't ADHD, but it was something else. And for those parents, also they're like, yeah, I could tell that there was something else going on as well too. So overwhelmingly, I don't see a ton of false positives.
That's good to know because there's almost reverse peer pressure these days on TikTok and everything. What do you have?
I know. Yeah. And for parents, I think there's so much information out on social media. It can be hard to know, is this accurate? Is it not accurate? And a professional will be able to help you like wade through all the things that you're seeing and all the challenges you're seeing.
If you can find a professional, scarcity of good therapists, I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing because it's really hard to find people.
I agree, honestly. I had a wait list for a long time, and I've talked to a lot of other families where they're like, I cannot find anyone. I myself have a hard time finding anybody else who specializes in ADHD in kids in San Diego. So it's tough. It is tough out there, but finding someone who does specialize is certainly very important. One tip I have for people is that if you are looking for a therapist, at least a lot of so psychologists, there's something that is called PsyPact that has passed where if there is a psychologist located in many states, it's like over 30 states or something at this point, they can see anybody in all 30 of those states. So it's not just state based, but California, you have to be licensed in California.
And
But
Psychology Today has a directory. There's some ways of
mhm.
people that to find somebody who takes your insurance and
Yes, all of those pieces. And Chad.org also, they have a provider network that I like to share with families where you can, because Chad, it's an organization specifically for ADHD. And so typically the providers listed there focus on ADHD as well.
okay, I think we've probably reached our time limit, but is there anything I haven't asked that you'd like to tell us about?
Let's see, there's so many things I guess I could say. What the one
Girls.
thing that, yeah, girls, the one thing I would say that I always love to share is that related to ADHD and emotions is ADHD does affect emotions, even though it is not in the diagnostic criteria. We know that people with ADHD have stronger emotions, and this can come out with girls, boys, anyone, inattentive symptoms as well too. But if you're noticing that your child is having some really challenging emotions as well too, could be a sign of ADHD.
Yeah, that's a good one. That I think
Mhm.
that's recognized more and more. Are
Yep,
you
I agree.
Are you planning to go to the AppSARD convention in January?
In San Diego, I'm going to be out of town until the day it starts on international trip. So I may go to part of it actually. Are you going to head there?
Yeah, I might see you there.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to be in Spain until the day that it starts, but I may go after that for at least like a couple of days. It's so exciting.
Thank you so much for your time with us.
Yeah.
Cynthia, do you have any questions that you didn't send me on the comments on the chat?
Yeah, what I wanted to say about SciPac is that that actually it's almost every state now, and Massachusetts and New York are trying to pass legislation, so they'll be included, and California might be the outlier. But
Hmm.
when
Mhm.
I went to the SciPac website and looked for people that diagnosed ADHD, they only listed 12 people. And so it's going, I was going to write an article to try to help families find where they could get help. If they got the diagnosis, maybe their local physician would feel comfortable going forward with
Mhm.
medication, but it's still a needle in a haystack.
Yes. Yeah. And I also think that website is probably not fully updated with the
Oh.
people
Hmm.
who
I
do
think they must
diagnose
pay
ADHD.
for it, so I would think it would be up to date. Anyway, I ended up
Yeah.
emailing those 12 people to ask them, and only a few of them responded. It's really surprising. Maybe they're already busy enough.
With a lot of the therapists I talk to, they say sometimes they get inundated with emails and they literally cannot even respond because they're so busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great impulse, Cynthia. I'm glad you're thinking of doing it
Yeah.
because parents really need help in that department.
That's what on our website we created a questionnaire that is developed to for 7-year-olds. So parents
Mm.
that fill it out would help them to say, my child might have ADHD. But Kathleen Nadeau said, yes, the questionnaire is really helpful, but the big issue is where do they get help? So she told
Yeah.
me about SciPac, and I've been working on calling university hospital, trying to find where there are people who might be in a different state that still could diagnose a young girl with ADHD. And
Hmm.
it's a lot of work it's coming, but it's not readily available yet.
I agree. Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think they could be diagnosed remotely. Yeah,
Why
I
not?
don't
Yeah.
think that's anything. So
No.
that's what I'm hoping to achieve. But what I would love to hear from you, Carrie, is the applications you said that are helpful, because I never heard of them. And I think that would
Yes.
really make a good blog article to make parents aware of things to put in place.
I
So
was
that,
going
Absolutely.
to blog about, yeah, Mightier
I
sounds.
love
Yeah,
Mightier.
I would have loved
Yes.
to have that for myself.
haven't heard
I
of
use
that either. So if I knew what the apps are and how they would tie in.
I absolutely. So I'm going to add them. I'll add the main apps that I suggest for families. So Life 360, that is the one that I talked about where it's you can track like your kids and it tracks their driving. Mightier, it's like a tool for emotion regulation in families. Bark is a parental control app for your child's phone, but it's way better than the Apple parental controls because it actually kids have a hard time getting around it first off. But then also, what I love is that rather than parents having to read through their child's messages, Bart will send parents a message if their child has any text messages or anything on their phone that's alarming for bullying, suicide. So,
So it's got AI watching for certain
yes,
language, and then those ones would get sent to the parent. And so the child
exactly.
doesn't feel like their privacy is invaded unless they're going out of bounds.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like very sensitive, I would say. So even like kids I've worked with, they're like, oh yeah, I alerted my mom to something that was like normal, right? But that's fine. I'd rather it be oversensitive. So yeah.
Oh, and there was a parent that told me about a way to have the child use a credit card and you get approval every time they go to use it or something.
I wonder if it's Go Henry. That may be it. That's like a debit card for kids, but I don't know about the
Yeah, I'll have to ask. It's the grandparents that gave it to their grandchild, and they get to approve how she's spending the money. Something
okay.
like that might be useful too.
Oh yeah. Money management. Yeah. Those are the ones I always recommend. But
I'll
it's been
look them
lovely to
up.
be here with you guys and to have me chat with you guys today. So thanks so much for thinking of me too.
Yeah. Thanks, Carrie.
for your
Of
time.
course.
Fun.
Bye.
Of course. See you guys.
See
Bye.
you later. Bye, Cynthia.
We believe all girls with ADHD should get a fair start in life by getting diagnosed by age 8. Visit us at www.findtheadhdgirls.org. Thank you.